I know mixing can be confusing if you're new to it and you see a lot of tips and tricks on what you should do. But here are 5 important things that you should not do when mixing with possible solutions. You may not realize some of these mistakes, but it's a common way for us to spot the difference between a pro mix and an amateur mix. So if you want to stop having amateur mixes or making your mixes sound amateur compared to the pros, here are 5 things that you need to stop doing right now. Now, the first mistake that a lot of people who are just getting started with mixing do is that they EQ too much. You hear a lot of vocals from amateur mixing engineers, so people who are just mixing, their vocals sound either too thin or too harsh or too boomy, or it just doesn't sound clear enough in the mix. And they usually blame the microphone, and most times it's not the microphone, it's just really bad EQ. So I'm going to show you what you should consider when you're EQing a vocal. So here's the original vocal.
He get one kind of feeling where they made me feel one kind. And I want to tell you this, cause the way he blow my mind. Girl, you know you bad like bad. You know you I don't need to deny, cause this your body is so bad.
And here's the vocal when you EQ it too thin and too harsh.
He get one kind of feeling where they made me feel one kind. And I want to tell you this, cause the way he blow my mind. Girl, you know you bad like bad. You know you I don't need to deny, cause this your body is so bad.
And this is when the vocal EQ is just fine.
He get one kind of feeling where they made me feel one kind. And I want to tell you this, cause the way he blow my mind. Girl, you know you bad like bad. You know you I don't need to deny, cause this your body is so bad.
The second common mistake that you can easily hear from amateur mix is that you compress either too much or too little. Now, when you load up a compressor, I see a lot of amateur mixing engineers dialing the knobs until something happens or until it feels good, right? And what this usually results in is that either the vocal sounds over compressed and lifeless, or the vocal sounds like there's hardly any compression on it. Now, you don't want to hear compression in the vocal. The main work of a compressor is just to control the difference between the loudest parts and the most quiet parts so that it doesn't sound obvious in the song, right? You want to control that difference. That's just simply what a compressor does. Now, I see some people they'll dial up a high ratio and a low threshold, right? And what this does is that it can over compress the vocal, make it lose the life and character. And you see some people also use a low ratio and a high threshold. And what this does is that it can make a vocal sound like there's hardly any compression on it. So let me show you how you can easily get over this problem. So here's a vocal with high ratio and low threshold.
He get one kind of feeling where they made me feel one kind. And I want to tell you this, cause the way he blow my mind. Girl, you know you bad like bad. You know you I don't need to deny, cause this your body is so bad.
Here's a vocal with low ratio and high threshold.
He get one kind of feeling where they made me feel one kind. And I want to tell you this, cause the way he blow my mind. Girl, you know you bad like bad. You know you I don't need to deny, cause this your body is so bad.
And here's a vocal with good ratio and good threshold.
He get one kind of feeling where they made me feel one kind. And I want to tell you this, cause the way he blow my mind. Girl, you know you bad like bad. You know you I don't need to deny, cause this your body is so bad.
And I'm sure you can hear the difference between these 3 comparisons. So you have to be careful when using compression on your vocals or on your instruments generally. Now, the third common mixing mistake that lots of people do make while mixing is that you use too much or too little reverb, or you do not even know how to use reverb at all. Even when I got started in mixing, reverb was a bit of a headache, right? I always wonder, is this reverb too much or is it too little? Or sometimes I'll have my vocals all washed up, sounding like there's so much reverb in the track. And sometimes clients will even complain that their vocal sounds dry and untouched. So this is a very common problem that many beginners still are trying to overcome. And a simple solution for this is using a reverb calculator. Because what this does is that reverb is a time-based effect, all right? And if you get the timing in the parameters wrong, you could easily sound overwashed or too dry, right? You want the parameters to be in sync with your current project. So using a free reverb calculator online, like this that I have right here, you can simply type in your tempo. It's going to tell you the parameters you need for your reverb. Or you can simply dial it in your reverb settings. So here's a dry vocal.
He get one kind of feeling where they made me feel one kind. And I want to tell you this, cause the way he blow my mind. Girl,
Now here's a vocal with too much reverb.
He get one kind of feeling where they made me feel one kind. And I want to tell you this, cause the way he blow my mind. Girl, you know you bad like bad. You know you I like I don't need to deny.
Now here's a vocal with the perfect reverb, just good enough.
He get one kind of feeling where they made me feel one kind. And I want to tell you this, cause the way he blow my mind. Girl, you know you bad like bad. You know you I like I don't need to deny, cause this your body.
I'm sure you can hear the difference between these three comparisons. The fourth common mistake that I see a lot of people who are just getting started in mixing make is that you try to hide elements in the mix. Now, if a mix is good, we should be able to hear pretty much everything in the mix, from the percussions to the background vocals and melodies. We should be able to hear all the details in the track, right? But if you have to start sacrificing detail for clarity, that means something wrong with your mix. Please check if your EQ is right, your compression, your panning, and your gain staging or leveling, right? So if you just understand these basic principles of mixing, which is EQ, compression, leveling, and panning, right? You should not have a problem with clarity. Your mixes should sound really clear and it should be able to translate on several listening devices. So the last but not the least mistake, in fact, this mistake should have even come first, is that I see a lot of people who have studio monitors or studio headphones. They do not use it as often as they use their consumer grade headphones and speakers, right? So the reason why this is a problem is that you want to be familiar with how your studio speakers or studio headphones sound as often as possible, right? You want to play enough songs, play enough music to hear it really sound, so that you're able to know how the bass should be, how the vocals should be, how the elements in general should just be in context of, a song, at least a popular song that is out there already. But when you are using consumer grade headphones, your ears won't be able to adapt or will not be trained properly to hear these nuances and these details in a song. So I'm not saying you should dispose your consumer grade headphones or headsets or speakers. I'm just saying use your studio grade listening devices more, right? Use your studio grade headphones more, use your studio grade speakers much more than you use your listening devices. In fact, I've never even used a consumer grade device for listening in like 4 or 5 years now. I've been using primarily studio monitor headphones and studio monitor speakers. All right. So this helps train my ear so I can know how things sound in context of a full song. If you found these tips helpful, please hit me with a like so that people can easily find this video and stop making some of these mistakes I just mentioned. Let's all make better music together, right? I remain Sir Classy. This is SCTuts. Cheers.